Millionaire Victoria Whitman invited her Arab maid Mustafa to a game of chess as a joke, not knowing that he was a young genius. She said in a haughty voice that echoed throughout the spacious living room of her Beverly Hills mansion, "Come on, my son, show me how to play chess in the slums." Her tone was laden with arrogance, as if he had never worked hard to gain anything in his life. Mustafa, 17 years old, was helping his mother, Carmen, serve food to the guests during a charity dinner party that Victoria had organized to collect donations for needy youth. However, she suddenly decided to make Mustafa an entertainment segment to amuse her guests. Among the guests were businessmen, politicians, and upper-class women from society who laughed heartily behind expensive glasses of mustache. Although the event was a charity event to help the poor, Victoria never expected that one of these poor people would be her. The one who served the appetizers in her house was deep down laughing at this delicious contradiction. She said with a sarcastic smile as she pointed to the inlaid Italian chessboard on the table, "I bet he only knows how to move the pieces. It will be interesting to see what this boy will do in front of someone who has really studied the game." Ham Milton, owner of 3 hotel chains, whispered to his wife, "I bet he doesn't even know that a knight moves the way he does." Laughter spread like waves in a stagnant lake of social superiority. Carmen, the mother who had spent 20 years cleaning Victoria's house and raising her son alone, lowered her gaze and gripped the tray tightly. 20 years of toil, and she still saw her son exploited for entertainment and to satisfy the ego of the rich. She had known Victoria since she was a teenager, and watched her transform from a spoiled girl into an arrogant lady who saw in others only social ranks. Victoria said in a soft tone, "Fake generosity, you can stop presenting for a few minutes. I want you to watch your son play. This will be a lesson for both of you." But Mustafa did not move at first. He remained silent for a few seconds, his dark eyes analyzing not only the board but the faces of all those sitting there. At the age of 17, he knew that silence was more eloquent than thousands of words. At that moment, he saw in front of him a group of elite people who did not know who he was. He stood with a strange calm, as if he were a calm before the storm. His fingers moved slowly, as if he were imagining the game on an invisible board. He said with surprising calm, "Of course, Mr. Dewey. It would be an honor for me if this story touched your heart and awakened in you the meanings of justice and pride in effort. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and follow the stories that prove that true strength lies in persistence, not in privilege." Victoria smiled with relief and settled into the leather chair like a queen preparing to watch excellent wrestling. "You've never played on a board like this before, haven't you? Genuine Italian marble, and every piece is more precious than it." "You know," said Jennifer Mills, a member of parliament, as she sat by the window. "Victoria, are you sure this isn't cruel? The poor boy will be humiliated." Victoria replied, adjusting her diamond earrings. "Ridiculous. This is a learning opportunity. He'll tell his friends that he played chess in a real palace." What Victoria didn't know, and she would discover for the worse, was that this Arab boy, Mustafa, had spent the past 8 years studying every opening, every plan, and every trap devised by the greats of the game. While his peers played video games, he immersed himself in the chess books that had piled up in the public library and watched legendary matches on a broken computer he had fixed himself. In the early morning hours while his mother was cleaning, Mustafa would analyze the matches of Kasparov, Fischer, and Carlsen. He had memorized more than 200 openings and could recall 50 famous chess defenses by heart, but the most important thing was that she did not know that she would be humiliated that night at the hands of Fatin, who belittled him for ethnic and class reasons in front of all her influential friends. And when she revealed the truth, it would not be just the loss of a game, but a profound lesson that she would carry with her throughout her life. Victoria sat arranging the pieces with theatrical movements, while Mustafa, he watched every face in the room, and what was in his eyes was not preparing for a match, but for writing a new history of who deserves respect. Victoria sat on the side of the white board with the same confidence as someone who had never lost anything noteworthy in his life. She said with a forced smile, "I always play white, my dear. It's a family tradition." She thus ignored the official chess rule that stipulates that a draw is used to determine the color. Mustafa merely nodded and arranged his black pieces with a precision that made Hamilton frown. Each piece was placed in the exact center of its box, as if he had played on hundreds of these boards before. Victoria said, looking at the guests, "Let's make things interesting. If the boy scares me on one point, I will donate $1,000 to one of the public schools." The audience laughed again, but Mustafa looked at her and smiled a smile that did not reach his eyes. Carmen felt a shiver run through her body. She had known that smile since he was young. He would show it whenever someone looked down on him. School competitions, that same smile that appeared on his face at 12 o'clock when he said to her, "I no longer need your help with math, Mum." Victoria opened the game with a conservative pawn move, that is, then said haughtily, "The Indian King's opening, we learned it at Harvard, dear," as if she were teaching a child to tie a shoelace. Mustafa responded immediately with a minute, c5 Sicilian defense. An eerie silence fell over the room. This was not the move of someone trying their luck, but of someone who knew the theories deeply. Mills whispered, leaning forward, "Interesting." Victoria hesitated for 3 seconds, and that was enough for Mustafa to realize that she had memorized some of the openings, but she did not understand the general principles of the game. A 3-move rivalry game was more familiar to social clubs than the result of tactical thinking. As Victoria considered her next move, Mustafa was momentarily lost in memories. 8 years ago, when he was 9 years old, he found a torn chess book in the library wastebasket and hid it in his bag and asked his mother to teach him the basic rules. She said to him while she was exhausted after 2 shifts of work, "My son, why do you want to learn this?" He answered her with his eyes shining, "I want to be like the children of the rich, Mom. They always say that they are smarter than us." At that time, Carmen's income did not exceed $600 a month. No private lessons, no computer, no internet, but there was the public library, which became his second home. Every day after school, Mustafa would walk 3 kilometers to sit among the books. The dusty, studying the matches of the greats returned to reality when Victoria played 3 shy moves, showing her conservative nature in chess and in life. As for Mustafa, he responded with a precise move. NCS. Development with a goal. He still plays as if he is following a mental text that he has memorized for years. Victoria said, pretending to understand, "Our little boy plays very quickly. In real chess, we think before we play." Here, Mustafa made the first intelligent psychological move. He stopped and pretended to think for 15 seconds, then played GS in preparation for the Vienna-Talville move. It seemed naive, but it was part of a deep tactical plan that would appear after 10 moves. Victoria shouted happily, "You see, he doesn't have the patience to think as expected." But Hampton, who had played chess in his university days, felt something uncomfortable. Victoria whispered to her, "This boy is setting up the dragon defense for speed." She replied in an annoyed tone, "Defense what?" He must have seen it in a movie, but as the game progressed, something disturbing appeared. Everyone Mustafa not only answers but sets the pace of the game. Every move of his was in the right place, and the chessboard was performing a silent symphony, and he was its composer. Carmen was watching from the corner of the room, her heart pounding. She knew Mustafa was talented, but she had never seen him face someone who took himself so seriously and arrogantly. For the first time in 20 years of working in this house, she saw fear in Victoria Whitman's eyes. Not the fear of defeat, but the fear of being discovered, that she was not as special as she thought she was. Every insult Victoria tried to use to diminish Mustafa only made him stronger, a silent strength built inside from the same injustice she was trying to impose. What those present did not know was that every arrogant action of theirs was like signing a defeat sentence written on a chessboard covered with 64 squares. On the 10th move, Mustafa made a move that made Hamilton choke on his whiskey. Mustafa sacrificed a pawn in a move that seemed simple, but every professional player realizes that there is a clever trap being set. Hamilton whispered in Victoria's worried voice, "This boy is not a beginner." But she did not listen. She closed her ears with arrogance. That, my dear, he memorized some moves from the internet. I will finish the game in 5 minutes. Then Mustafa did something unexpected. He calmly got up from his chair and went to Karam, who was watching everything from the corner. He said to her in a low voice but clear in the prevailing silence, "Mom, do you remember when you told me one day you will see who we are or what I repeat?" Her eyes glistened with tears. Yes. He remembered that day with all its wounds on his 15th birthday when she could not buy him a cake and he had found her crying in the kitchen. He promised her that he would change everything one day. Jennifer Mills whispered to her husband, watching that human moment, "This boy has more nobility than all of us." Victoria tapped her nails on the table in frustration. "Can we continue with me?" Other commitments, no time for dramatic scenes. Mustafa returned to the board, but something had changed in his appearance. He was no longer the shy teenager who had been invited to amuse himself, but rather a young man carrying on his shoulders years of sacrifices, the secrecy of his studies, and the determination forged in the ordeal of poverty. The 11th move was surgically precise, which raised amazement on Victoria's face. He had made 2 double threats. If she protected the king, she would lose the minister, and if she protected the minister, she would receive a checkmate in 3 moves. Victoria whispered, trying to comprehend the board. "This is not possible. Unbelievable," and at that moment, Milton understood the truth. "Victoria, you are being defeated by a boy who has never been to a chess club in his life." Jennifer Mills stopped drinking champagne and leaned her body towards the board with full attention. The hotel chain owner turned off his phone, and his wife, Milton, placed the magazine on the table. Everyone was watching, and they all saw reality changing in silence. Carmen recognized that look in her son's eyes, the look he had when he sat for hours in the library studying old games on a slow, broken computer, the look that used to wake him up at dawn to solve tactical problems before school. Victoria finally moved a piece, a desperate attempt to escape the trap, but it was too late. Mustafa had calculated it before, so he said in a soft voice as he moved the minister, "Check." The silence in the room was shocking. Everyone felt that something historic was happening in front of them. Victoria looked at the board, then at Mustafa, then returned to staring at the pieces. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, but with anger because they were being destroyed by someone she belittled. She said in a loud voice, "Something that cannot be learned by anyone. You must have memorized it from someone." Mustafa smiled for the first time since the beginning of the match and said, "Yes, Mrs. Whiteman. I learned it from Garry Kasparov." Milton shouted in astonishment. "Kasparov taught you?" Mustafa replied calmly, "Not personally. I studied all of his documented matches, 183 matches exactly. This is the plan he used in his 3rd match against Karpov in the World Final in 1984. Victoria looked around, searching the faces of the guests for confirmation, support, or a way out of this farce. But what she found was something she had never seen in her life: looks of disapproval. For the first time, the eyes of those present did not look at her with admiration, but with shame and perhaps pity. Carmen took a step forward, her voice steady and strong. "My son used to wake up every day at 5 in the morning to study. Before school, he used to walk 6 miles to the public library because we didn't have internet, and we used to light our nights with candles because the electricity was cut off from us. That night, he used to analyze chess matches with a heart that believed he would reach the room. The room became silent as if it were a graveyard, and the words were like spears piercing the walls of arrogance in Victoria's chest." Mustafa looked at his mother, and in his eyes was a mixture of love and determination. Then he said calmly, "Checkmate." He put the minister in the last position, the square from which there was no escape. Victoria froze in her place, her eyes on the board, as if she was hoping the pieces would move to fix what had happened. But the truth was clear. She had lost, and not just a chess match, but also her dignity, her social image, and what remained of her prestige. Mustafa, that boy she had invited for entertainment, was the one who silently broke her dominance, with knowledge and politeness. Those present interacted with the scene as if waking up from a dream, but it was not a dream, but a living lesson. Before their eyes, in arrogance, prejudice, and the power of perseverance, Victoria whispered in a low voice. It was a coincidence. He must have memorized that plan herself. Meltony broke the silence and said as he stood up, Victoria, this boy played a branch of the Sicilian defense. I personally did not know her, and I have been playing this game for 40 years. At that moment, Jennifer Mills took out her phone and began recording a hidden image. With her political sense, she knew that she was facing a viral moment and that boy would become a symbol of something bigger than chess. Suddenly, Victoria shouted as she stood up and suddenly fell. Some pieces on the table. I don't accept that something is not right. Someone trained him to insult me. All this is arranged. And while she was saying those words, Mustafa remained sitting with that serenity that never left him throughout the game. He said calmly, and his gaze did not tremble, do you want another match, ma'am? I can play against anyone in the audience, or even against all of them at the same time if you want. The audience exchanged glances. The show was almost impossible, but after he narrated it, no one dared to doubt him. Victoria screamed, her face changing between red and pale. Now you are becoming arrogant. A boy from the neighborhoods does not talk to those above him like that. Here Carmen took another step, and for the first time in 20 years she looked into Victoria's eyes without lowering her head. She said in a clear voice, ma'am, my son is not from the poor neighborhoods. We are from a working class. Honest, and he is not arrogant. He is honest in what he says, and this is something you cannot to say it about yourself. The tension in the room was like swords being held at necks. Some guests began to look annoyed, others shook in their seats, and everyone realized that they were watching something greater than a chess match. Victoria turned to Carmen, her eyes blazing. How dare you speak to me in this way? Have you forgotten your place in this house? Carmen replied calmly, more impactful than a scream. No, ma'am, I did not forget my place, but I remembered my value. Hamilton entered, his voice full of embarrassment and distress. Victoria, perhaps we should admit that this boy is truly talented, and that what happened is a lesson for us all. Victoria laughed bitterly and said, don't you understand? All of this was arranged. Someone trained him to embarrass me in front of you. At that moment Mustafa stood up, his voice coming out calmly and clearly, carrying a maturity beyond his years. Ma'am Whitman, do you want to know? In truth, no one trained me to insult me. I spent 8 years studying chess because I dreamed one day of playing with people who appreciate the game and respect talent regardless of color, class or name. He paused for a moment, then looked at everyone, and when you invited me to show you how to play chess in the neighborhoods, I assumed I would be facing a fair match. But I discovered that you didn't ask for a match but humiliation. Jennifer Mills stopped filming and looked at the scene in astonishment and said to him, in a warm tone, how old are you, son? 17, madam. Since when do you play seriously? 8 years ago. Mills looked at Victoria, a mixture of surprise and disapproval on her face. Victoria, you have lost to a self-educated boy, one whose mother you used to ridicule, a boy you summoned to ridicule, and you ridiculed the whole reality. Victoria felt the weight of the looks not full of admiration as she was accustomed to, but of judgment, shame, and admonition. She whispered in a low, broken voice, I did not know that he was playing seriously. Hamilton replied to her, rising, in a tone that carried impatience. The point is not whether he was playing seriously, but that you invited him to insult him because he is from your maid, because he is dark, and because he is poor in silence. After his words, he was thick, like a quilt covering the face of old age, lined up with a calm spirit. He arranged the pieces on the chessboard and said, thank you, Mrs. Whitman. It was a truly educational match. Then he turned to his mother. My mother, shall we go? I have school in the morning. Kareem smiled as she took off her apron, then looked at Victoria and said, thank you, ma'am, for proving to me that my son deserves to be in better places than this one. As they headed towards the door, Jennifer Mills shouted, Mustafa, do you care about scholarships? I know universities that want students with your talent. Mustafa stopped and smiled, his only sincere smile of the night. My lady, she gave him her card, arriving on Monday. Victoria stood there as if trying to comprehend what had happened. In less than an hour, she transformed from the mistress of the party to the subject of scandal. When the door closed behind Mustafa and Karam, the guests began to leave one by one with cold greetings and looks devoid of affection. Victoria remained alone, staring at the board on which her ego had been crushed by the hand of a boy she considered entertainment. She did not know that this match was only the first move in a bigger game, a game in which Mustafa would change his history and shake a system built by privilege and prejudice. Mustafa Santos, the Arab boy, did not want revenge, but built himself until he became an inspiration. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to follow more stories that prove that value is not measured by money, but with personality and perseverance.